basketball voice, the great Tim Legler joins us. Legs!
What's up, brother?
How you doing, man? Buddy?
I see you got the old school Philly zip up hoodie. I love it.
All right, look, after last night when the big guy returns, are you kidding me? I had to throw that on.
Hey, man, obviously the news breaks and everybody's super excited about that game. Everybody was tuning into that game last night to see what that was going to look like. And all things considered, man, I couldn't be more impressed with what he was able to do. And the fact that he played 29 minutes. I mean, that's shocking to me because he's a big, heavy center that's had a lot of injury issues, and even guards coming back or elite level forwards that come back from that long layoff in today's NBA, those guys are playing like 16, 18 minutes max in their first game. So the fact that he could go 29 and he was on the court at the end of the game, and they don't win the game if he's not in the game at the end, was very impressive to me, man. 12 for 12 from the line. When you're that tired, very difficult, man, to slow yourself down and breathe and let your muscle memory take over when you're that gassed at the foul line. I've been in that boat before and I'm that tired going to the line, man. It is really hard to keep your form together. So the fact that he had that finesse, the concentration, he had a massive impact on the game. Very impressed.
It's funny, Legs, that you bring that up because he hits the 4 free throws. The first two give him the lead, and he has to steal, goes down the floor, gets fouled. They challenge it, but then, it's over. It's held up. His first one, he almost falls across the line, but it's money. And his touch is ridiculous. Like, we talk about that. You and I have had these multiple conversations about that. For a big to be able to shoot free throws the way he does with the propensity to go to the line is just, part of his greatness. It's a huge deal, part of his game.
Yeah, I mean, he's the most dominant one-on-one force in the post since Shaq in his prime. There's no denying that. But that's not ultimately what defines his greatness and what makes him such a massive problem to match up with and scheme for and everything else. It's his mid-range jump shot. And that belies logic. Like, there shouldn't be a guy that big, that strong, that powerful that can shoot the ball like that from 15 to 18 feet. It doesn't make sense. And then to be that consistently good at the foul line. So that, to me, is what's always been the thing that's been the most impressive about Embiid is that he can dominate that middle area of the floor, and you don't worry about him eating up fouls and going to the line in situations where you have to have it. And he did it again last night. In Oklahoma City, look, they're playing super shorthanded.
Yeah, no Gilgeous-Alexander.
Yeah, their two best players weren't on the floor. Yeah. And Jalen Williams, by the way, it's a shame the Sixers fans didn't get to see him last night in person because he is, I've called him an emerging star most of the year. He actually, I think, has arrived. He's almost like all-star status now. And I can't imagine how bright his future is going to be as a co-star to one of the most elite offensive players in the league. So you don't have either of those guys. Yeah, that's a big deal. But, Sixers didn't have Maxey. I get it. They counter some of that. Doesn't matter. These games are critical to Philly. They've got a huge game tomorrow night against Miami because I think that's 7-8. It looks like they're headed for that 7-8 matchup, and obviously home court would be a big deal in that game. Not only would it be a big deal to get out of that game, it then means you have the 7 seed, you avoid the Celtics. So there is a huge amount at stake on Thursday night against the Heat, because the Heat win that game, it's a wrap.
Yeah.
They're not catching them, right? But if the Sixers win it, it's still not done. They got more work to do, but their schedule is significantly more favorable.
Yeah, and it's interesting. And I'm with you. And we've talked about this. You can't – it's almost impossible to glean anything for the future on these regular season games because who's out, who's not playing. Right. But when you look at – the only thing that I'm curious of what you think is – and you saw it obviously before the injury, but now you have this supporting cast of role players around him, and it is – you can extrapolate a little bit as to what they'll be like with him. Like having Buddy Hield, having Oubre, Campaign, right? Like they just feel deeper and more explosive off the bench.
No, there's no question about it. and the Buddy Hield factor is going to be big. The amount of clean looks he's going to get when Embiid is out there and himself. I mean, Embiid had 7 assists last night. Think about that. I mean, the guy had 24 and 7 assists. He had 6 turnovers, which you expect, man. It's just bad reads, timing. Turnovers are more likely than anything. I think more likely even than bad shooting nights when you first come back, because there's just the timing on what you're trying to do, and you're trying to do too much with the ball. But
is your brain, real quick, is your brain so much far ahead of your body? Is that kind of part of it too? Because in your mind, like, but you still have to get back to the muscle memory of it.
No question. And I think the other thing that's a factor, look, I'm not a Joel Embiid level player. I was a role player, but I did have, a really significant injury. The year that I led the league in 3-point shooting, at the end of that season, I tore my ACL, like the 80th game of the year. I didn't come back until the following late February. So I went all that time without playing. And now here I am, first major injury in my life. And I got this big, heavy brace on. I'll never forget it. It was the first game after the break. We're playing the Knicks, which at that time was one of our main rivals in Washington. And it was like an alley fight whenever you played them. Like, that was the team with the Starks and Mason and Derek Harper and those guys. And I remember standing up to check into that game, and like the adrenaline going through your body when you've been out that long is indescribable. And then on top of it, you have this thing in your head where you're still not mentally ready to like jump and land in traffic. Just instinctively just play. You know what I mean? And I think Embiid, that's the other thing he's dealing with. I don't know about you, Anthony, but I know for me, every single time that dude jumped last night in the lane, I was nervous.
Yes. And then when he hits the ground,
and he fell.
Yeah.
And he fell on the baseline the one time, right? And he kind of spun around. He laid on his back. And I know, as it turns out, it was just absolute exhaustion. Like, he could barely breathe.
Yeah.
But in the moment, you don't know that. It's like, oh my God, are you kidding me right now? And I understand like the level now for players, like, you have to be like so far like beyond 100% before you play. When in my era, when you came back, if you were 80%, you played if you could help. Like, that's not what we do now. So I understand, like, he probably feels literally, physically like perfect, like he does the first day of the season. Like, that's probably how he felt last night. But for us watching, you're holding your breath every single time. Like, he went after aggressively to block a shot right in the beginning of the game. And there was 3 other guys in the area, and like one of them landed on his lower body. I'm just like, oh my, what is this? What is he doing? But but he's not feeling what we're feeling, like the anxiety for him to go through those moments. So that's the other thing. It's going to take a little time for him, I think, to feel totally comfortable. And his body is just reacting, and he's not thinking at all. That's going to take time.
Well, I think that's what's so important for him to come back now, because you do have a handful of games to just kind of get reacclimated, right? Like, listen, he's not going to be anywhere near, in basketball shape where he was when the playoffs start. But at least you get the reacclimation factor and get that over with. Yes,
massive to get that. And he said it last night. This will probably be the hardest one, and he's right. I'm looking at this. They have one back-to-back, Memphis, San Antonio. You should be able to beat San Antonio without him. So I don't know that they play him in back-to-back games yet. It's a shame because there's only 6 left. So does that mean he only gets 5 games? I'd be surprised, if they play him on the 7th against San Antonio. But again, it's one of the worst teams in the league. You should, but they do have Wembanyama, so you kind of need the size. That's going to be a tough call for them. But look, Miami, that's the one. That is the game. And then you got Memphis, San Antonio, Detroit, Orlando, and Brooklyn. And I mean, Orlando is the one good team, but who knows? Who knows at that point?
Yeah, they're in rest mode.
Yeah, they might have something locked up, and they're happy with where they're at. They might not play anybody. So their road is definitely favorable for them to catch the Heat, play the 7-8 at home, and then get on to the Bucks. I mean, that's laid out in front of you right now. But none of that happens if they don't win tomorrow night in Miami.
Yeah, no, it has to. They have to. Hey, let me ask you a couple things. One, Embiid just himself. We have had this conversation, debates in Philadelphia. Do you start over? And I was always one that I'm like, listen, you're in the middle of this whole thing. And I like what Morey did, which is, hey, you don't move Embiid. You don't start over. You keep playing it out. And then you're going to go into an off season where it's just Embiid and Maxey, and you get to build the whole team around them. And I'd much rather be in that spot and still have a couple more shots at the prize than start over. I'm a big believer in, you cherish your superstars, all right? Like, they all have warts, but you got to cherish them.
He's one of the top 2 or 3 players in the NBA. He's one of the best players in the history of this franchise. He is the most dominant offensive force in the Eastern Conference. The only reason I say Eastern Conference because I think the best offensive player in the league is Luka Doncic. But just in terms of the amount of domination and facilitation and scoring, there's no answer for Luka. That's the only reason he's not, I say, the best offensive player in the league. But in the East, he is. No matchup, no answer. He's 30 years old. I know what he's been through physically. There's no way that start over, those 2 words would never enter my mind. They would not be in my vocabulary when you've got a young star in addition at the guard spot now in Maxey. You've added nice pieces around him. Look where they were. Look at their net rating this year with Embiid on the floor. It's basically the second best team in the NBA besides the Boston Celtics when Joel Embiid plays, period. So you're that close to, listen, keeping the guy healthy through the season and then through 2 months, I'm not going to sit there and say that's an easy thing, clearly based on his history, but I do think it's worth rolling the dice year after year that you're going to be able to do it, and maybe this will be the year. And here's the one thing that's going to be interesting about this. Assuming his knee holds up, a couple years ago, Steph Curry, when they won the championship, Steph Curry had a injury in the spring that kept him out for a while. And you know what that meant when the playoffs started? The dude felt like a spring chicken. His legs were so fresh when the playoff run started, assuming you're healthy again, which he was. LeBron went through this in the bubble season. He missed some time, comes back. You feel fresher. You're energized. You're not as worn down as you typically are at the end of the season when you miss a chunk of time. So this could be a blessing. It's going to be a tough road, man. You got to go win a playing game, then on the road against a really good Bucks team, and then you got to go, win another series against, probably the Knicks or the Cavs, and then or the Magic, and then you got to go and play on the road against the Celtics. Like, this is a tough road, but to sit there and think that you're going to go get equal value for Embiid and be in the same position is silly, man. You got to roll the dice with a guy that's 30 years old, that's this dominant when you've put nice pieces around him.
Thank you.
End of story. It's silly. It's silly. It really is.
It drives me nuts because it's like, well, what do you want?
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you something, man. Okay, we both have a bunch of knucklehead Philadelphia sports fans as friends. We know that. Okay, are you telling me that this is the pulse you're getting from the main people you talk to on a daily basis?
Yes.
Come on, man.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, because here he is. He's going to get hurt again.
When you play these scenarios out, okay, what you can't just say move on from Embiid. You can't do that. You got to tell me who. What is your plan?
Oh, if I told you the amount of people, they should have gotten Halliburton for it on the table, trade him for all this stuff. And it's like, guys, you have it. Like, the dude is a dominant force. And forget about, look, we all want a title, and it's been since 1983 and the whole thing. And, you and I were young men. The idea is you need to be in the mix every year. And Embiid is a dominant force. And by the way, he's a joy to watch during the season. You get to see him, drop 70. He's a force that's unique.
Yeah, he's a one-off, man. Look, and I love Tyrese Halliburton and any other name you want to throw out there. There's a few guys in this league, only a few, that are one-offs. There's one of them. I mean, you could say that about Jokic.
Yep.
You could say that about Luka.
Yep.
You could say that about Giannis. Okay, these guys are one-offs. You can't say that about Jason Tatum. There's other guys like Tatum in this league.
That's right.
And you could go down the list and talk about a lot of these contending teams. There are other guys that play like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. There are other guys that play like Anthony Edwards. There are other guys that play like Kawhi and Paul George. There are other guys like that. There's nobody like Embiid. There's nobody like Jokic. There's nobody like Luka, and there's nobody like Giannis. Those guys are one-offs, man. And if you have one in-house,
cherish it.
Roll with it. Roll with it. And if he just continually gets hurt, those are the breaks, man. But you find here's one of the reasons I'm so I was before the injury so excited about this group, because it's the first time that Embiid was going to go into the playoffs, if he had stayed healthy, with a guy as his co-star at the lead guard position that flat out was not going to shrink when the lights got turned up. And I wanted to, because he's not. Maxey might have bad shooting games. He's not going to be affected by the moment the way Ben Simmons and James Harden were. He's just not. So I wanted to see what that would do to empower Embiid, because I think those moments those guys had affected him mentally, where he wasn't his best either. And then he took justifiable criticism. Well, what about Embiid? When every time you criticize Harden, well, what about Joel? Right, you're right. He wasn't his best. But you know what I'm telling you? Those guys looking like that in those big spots was an anchor around his ankle. It was. It dragged him down. And Maxey uplifts. He uplifts Embiid. And that's what I wanted to see, man. I wanted to see that combination. Look, we're gonna get some version of it, it looks like. But it might be too late, man. Too big a hole to dig out of. Like all of those things. It might be too hard for them here late in the year. But I certainly want to see if we can do that next year. I mean, that would be my mentality.
Well, you made a great point. You and I were talking last week, and you made a great point about Harden, right? Like in that game 6, like because Harden dominates the basketball, when he's not effective and his body language sags, it's the whole team sags, because when you have the guy with the ball in his hands sagging all that time, it's infectious.
You can survive. And by the way, Philadelphia fans can forgive bad shooting nights out of great players. You can forgive it. It happens. It happens. And it's not always because of pressure. Some guys can have bad shooting night in a big spot, man. It happens, right? You could forgive that, and you could overcome that as a team, because the guy's playing the same way that he just played for 82 games. He looks exactly the same level of aggressiveness. Ball screen, turn the corner, get inside the foul line, attack the rim or shoot the floater like we watched you do all year, or throw a lob or a pocket pass. Like, read the situation, but if it calls for you to score, take the shot. That's not what we're talking about with Simmons and Harden. They deviated so far from what their normal mentality was as a player that the rest of that team and the coaching staff are looking at that like, how are we supposed to overcome this now? Especially, honestly, with Harden, because he's got the ball the whole time. Like, everything is predicated on his on team's inability to keep that dude in control, because he's such a tough cover. He's such a great tough matchup. Like with Ben, it was different. Like, he had nights like that in the regular season. Like, oh, here he is, but he'd rebound, he'd facilitate, right? He'd play that way. But then here he goes in the playoffs. All of a sudden, he wants to give it up and go hide in the corner. And James Harden would turn the corner, and you're like, look at the rim. No, not even looking at the rim. And that's the shot. That's what I'm talking about. You can't overcome a guy deviating from who he is and reading situations the right way. And also, by the way, for a fan base and a media, when you sense fear, that's the one thing that's hard to forgive or understand as a fan base, as a media contingent. And that's when this thing snowballs out of control. Wow, he looked terrified. How are we supposed to deal with that going forward? That's not Tyrese Maxey. He doesn't have that in him. Again, look, he might have a couple bad shooting nights in the series. He's going to look the same. He's got the same energy, same bounce, and take every one of the same shots that he's supposed to take that he just took for 82 games. And by the way, he's going to have some other nights when he probably goes off and he picks everybody up. But the bottom line is, when Embiid looks at that dude, when they're going out there to jump ball circle, he's looking in the eyes of a guy that's going to bring it. And that is absolutely what Joel Embiid needs next to him.
So we'll get deeper into it during the playoffs, during our weekly visits. But I do want to ask you about Milwaukee and Boston, right? So Porzingis to the Celtics and Derek White, like, they're playing some epic ball. Yeah. What's their beatability? Like, how do you view them right now as like a lock to get to the finals?
I mean, I'm pretty much on record as saying, barring something unforeseen here with an injury to one of their top guys, they're going to the finals.
Right.
You know, and look, Anthony, think about what they did. So
Yeah.
they had Tatum and Brown, right? And they had Derek White last year, which is a massive acquisition. And now you lose your two best defensive players and two glue guys, right? Robert Williams and Marcus Smart. So how are you going to replace that? Well, let's go out and get a guy that arguably has been the best on the ball perimeter defender in the league during his time in the league, and Drew Holiday. And by the way, he's a better offensive player than Marcus Smart. Let's do that. And then, so you don't give up anything defensively and you add offense. And then for Robert Williams, let's go get a guy that's been top 10 in the league in rim protection since he came into the league, in Porzingis, and who, by the way, is a infinitely better offensive player than what you gave up. So they're one of the few teams that actually lost key components, particularly defensively, and didn't lose anything on that end and significantly improved their offense. That's a tough thing to overcome for the rest of the league. And look, I like the role players too, but it's not about the role players. It's about those five guys: Holiday, White, Tatum, Brown, and Porzingis. I saw something amazing the other day. Maybe this was a couple weeks ago, so maybe the number's a little bit different now. But at that time, they played the Knicks a couple weeks ago. I called the game, and I looked at the game notes, and it said in there, when those five guys were on the court, they had blitzed ball screen 5 times the entire season.
What?
And what that means is you are either one of two things. You are, because of your defensive capabilities, you're either able to like hedge and fight over the screen or fight under and stay on the guy, right? Keep your matchups, or you're able to switch everything. And no team in the league can duplicate that. And as great as that is, they absolutely end you with their barrage of three-point shooting.
Yeah.
They take more than any team in the league. They've got more dudes that shoot it at a high percentage than any team in the league. And that's where they just go on these massive runs offensively.
Yeah,
now,
because they could stop you, and then all of a sudden they go nuts.
They go on a run, and it's lights out. Now, I will say this: look, if you're looking for
Celtics,
one thing,
I hate them, legs.
I know, man. I know it's. I hear you as a Philly fan. I get it. They have one Achilles heel, and it is they have a propensity to hunt 3-point shots too often early in the clock, and too many like possessions in a row where they don't really make you work sometimes. And as a result, you can string together some stops against them if they go cold, and it gives you a chance. That's really it. They're as complete as it gets, and that versatility of the starting five and the number of weapons they have. And now Mazzulla's not, kind of deer in the headlights anymore. He's got better command of what's going on late in the games. I don't know. I just don't see anybody beating them, man. Look, they're 12 games up on the 2 seed in the East. I mean, think about that. There's a reason for that.
No, they rolled. And then the other one is Milwaukee, and how vulnerable. And it's interesting because when, Dame comes and you go, oh, my God, it's Dame and Giannis and that crew. But they defensively, they're awful. And how vulnerable are they?
And Philadelphia fans are going to love a couple of things I'm about to say, particularly as who it relates to. But, all right, they're very vulnerable, first of all. And part of it is because one of the things you thought when they got Lillard, you knew what they were giving up defensively, the difference between Holiday and Lillard. It's massive, right? Because Dame kind of went under the radar defensively in Portland because no one cared. Like, well, look what the guy's got to do. He's got to get 35 just to keep him in games. No one cared that he was like laying on screens and like jogging back in transition. Like, no one cared about it. Well, now you're on a team. The day you got there, you're expecting to win a title. And by the way, you're playing next to a dude that consistently plays as hard as anybody in the league. So now the glaring difference is something you notice, right, at that spot. But here's the thing. They could overcome that if Giannis and Dame just hit their stride as a tandem offensively. And I don't think they have. And I think the biggest reason is because Damian Lillard, for the first time in his life, is not completely free of mind to just do what he wants offensively because he's playing with a better player. He's never been in that boat. That's a large shadow Giannis casts. And I think there's a little bit of deference going on. And you heard Giannis recently say, hey, man, I want it to be his team. Just think like it's your team because I'm going to get mine. I'm going to be fine. I don't need anything from you. Just go play like you did in Portland. But I think that's easier said than done. And Lillard, sometimes I watch him, and he can still be really good for spurts. And like late in games, he's been pretty good for them. But overall, it's just not quite the same, and you're giving up something defensively. So I think they are vulnerable. And then here's the thing I said, I'm going to Philadelphia fans here. They actually look. They were bad right when Doc got there, but you can't blame him. That's midseason joining a team. It's rough, right? Then they looked really good, and clearly they were playing harder. Defensively, they were better. He did something, like he got more accountability. Maybe he could talk to those guys different in a film session than Adrian Griffin could because he's got more cachet. I don't know. Something changed. But here's the thing: the one thing that they do struggle with, it's one of the worst teams in the league in clutch situations. And Philadelphia fans can relate to that when Doc was in Philly, right? Like that was something that you guys struggled with. You worried about Doc coming through, like pushing the right button, drawing up the right thing and an ATO. Like, what are we going to do? So that team, and I'm not putting this all on Doc because Giannis has something to do with that too. And his free throw shooting is resurfacing again. Some of those issues, so they're vulnerable, there's no doubt. And if Philadelphia got into a best of 7, and by that point, Joel Embiid would have 5 to 7 games under his belt to get his stamina up, I think Philadelphia would have a great chance of winning that series.
Wow, thanks. Hey, well, I got you because nobody loves basketball like you. Like, people don't even realize this, that you could have probably played in the big leagues. You were a standout baseball player, really, really, really good baseball player, and you could probably you could have had a Major League Baseball career. You just love basketball, and you fell in love with basketball. And so I got to ask you about the Final Four. We talked about this early in the tournament, and UConn, oh my God, that 30-0 run was something I've never seen before.
No, man. Look, Brad Underwood, the head coach of Illinois, is a tough nut, man. And he's got a big ego, like most of the big-time college coaches do. To watch him come out of the locker room, pop a soda open, look in the camera and go, wow, that sucked. Right? I mean, this is what UConn reduced them to. Ashes, man. And honestly, I don't see anybody left standing that's going to challenge them. When they really turn it up, they're a completely different level of physicality and rebounding dominance than anything you see out there. And NC State's got a talented big, and Purdue's got Zach Edey, and whoever comes out of that game, is going to get UConn most likely in the national championship game. And where do you see the level of just grown man tenacity that's thrown at those guys? So they're on a completely different level. But I'll be honest with you, I've been far more interested in the women's Final Four.
Yes, I was gonna bring it up.
How good is that?
Caitlin Clark looked like Tim Legler. 9 threes.
Man, oh man. Hey, by the way, I want to say something here because Caitlin Clark I'm as enamored with her as anybody else is, and I just absolutely love what she's made of. And the fact that she rises to the occasion the way she does in these spots when everybody is she's so scrutinized and under the spotlight and all the pressure. She's got to carry the whole team in terms of creating offense too. And can you also go get 35, 40? We're going to need that out of you. It's crazy when you think about it. And she just handles herself so great. But here's the thing. I think personally, the comparison's always Steph. If you translate it to the men's game, it's not. It's Luka. It's Luka. And I'm going to tell you why that is. The shooting range, okay, yeah, that's Steph. But guess what? Luka also. But I get it. The shooting range off the dribble, that's Curry. He's uniquely able to do that from those distances at that rate. That's her. I get that. But think about it. She doesn't move without the ball. Luka doesn't move without the ball. They do all their action after they get it first. Secondly, they control every possession for everybody on their team. That's not Steph. Like Steph does his damage in these tight little windows when he gets the ball. And if he gives it up, Draymond is the one that's going to go control the action.
Yeah.
Right? Somebody else is going to do that. Caitlin Clark, Luka Doncic, they literally control every aspect. And when they deliver the basketball, it's expected to be a shot because I gave it to you at exactly the right time, in exactly the right place. After I've done all the work to create this, here, shoot it. You got nothing else to think about. That's not really the Warriors either. They pass and chase and pass and cut and run guard split action and all that. That's not what Iowa does. That's not what Dallas does. So that's why for me, just in watching her next time, and watch Luka. Just don't think that's, to me, the more apt
That's a great comp.
comparison.
Great comp. Spot on, Legs. No, you're right, because she does. She controls, like, every possession does go through her. And it's like, you watch Dallas, he's got the ball in his hands every possession, however they go. He has a fingerprint on every possession, and she does.
By the way, and I also want to say something real quick. Last thing on this, for young players, and I got 300 kids come through my camp every summer, and a lot of them are young ladies. Right?
I need more. I need more on the Tim Legler camp, because everybody in Jersey goes nuts over it.
Yeah, man, we're like every year now, like we're already like record number of early registrations, so we're gonna be sold out early again. But that's not even why I brought it up. There's young ladies that come to the camp, and look, they're not going to turn into Caitlin Clark. I wouldn't say never, right? Because if somebody would have told me I'll never make it to the NBA, right? So I'm not saying that, but you know what I mean.
Yep.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. When you watch Caitlin Clark, she's got a crafty handle. She's not blazing fast. She's got a crafty handle. But when you watch her with her handle, Anthony, she basically does three things with her handle. Everything leads to either creating space to shoot, creating a window to pass, or creating a lane to drive. She's not playing with the ball for no reason. And there's simple stuff. It's the quick little bounce behind the back to change hands to get into her shot. It's a spin move off a drive to turn the corner and get to the rim. It's a between the leg or it's a hesitation. Those are the four moves. It's nothing flashy. You can find girls in the women's game that have better handle than her, but it's what she's doing with it is so purposeful. And that's what my advice to young players. Just master a few of them, but use them for a reason. Don't just play with the ball. No coach wants to see it. It's easier to guard. And that's what I love about Caitlin Clark. When she goes to one of those, it's absolutely designed to create one of the three things I said: shooting space, passing window, or driving lane.
It's funny. I teach, I coach the kids in fifth grade at St. Margaret's. And I tell them all the time, when they get the basketball, right? Like, there's three. Understand, before you do anything, before you put the ball on the floor, get in your 3 points. You have 3 things you can do. And you come, you have the ball, you protect the basketball, you can look, you can get bigger, you can see where you want to go. Do you want to pass it? Read the floor. You can do it quickly when you put the ball on the floor. And it's so amazing when you see it done at an elite level, like she does it. It's beautiful. It's really one of the building blocks of the game.
She's being guarded, and look, it's been a lot of talk about the matchup, put Haley Van Lith on her. I agree that was a mistake, and particularly playing her sort of straight up early in the game. I mean, she comes down, hits that first trip. You got a problem on your hands now. For a shooter, everything's unleashed. And so I thought Kim Mulkey had an arrogant approach to playing her that Caitlin Clark destroyed. But normally most nights, she's getting like the best athletes. She's getting size meeting her at the rim, and she's unfazed. And it's just such an awesome thing to watch somebody operate like that. And the other night, like, for her to look like everything was so comfortable and operating at such a comfortable pace when everybody else was like frenetic, and she just kind of like, I was built for this. And you think about this. 2 40-point, 10-assist games in the history of the women's NCAA tournament, and she did it 2 years in a row to get to the Final Four. I mean,
that's insane.
What more can you say about her, man? So, like, Friday night, this is a big one. UConn, Paige Beckers, going up against Caitlin Clark, and then, of course, South Carolina on the other side, undefeated Dawn Staley. I'm just so fascinated, man, with what the women's game has become. 12.2 million people watched that game the other night.
It was amazing, and they were betting on it. It was the most bet on game ever. I saw that note come.
It lived up, and rarely do the big games live up, man. But that one lived up. So I'm excited. You're right, man. I'm just a hoops junkie. What am I gonna say?
It's the best.
Yeah,
it's why I love talking to you, man. Well, for a multitude of reasons, but we could just geek out. You're the greatest. Later on today, the NBA, the All NBA show with you and Adam Mares. It's an amazing watch. And where else? Where's your ESPN schedule?
Well, just so people know, Wednesdays are one day off. You're right, Bo. It is Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. So I am off today, but it's all City NBA podcast. You got to check it out, man. If you want, like, in a world where it's harder and harder to find just legitimate basketball talk, like what you just watched. Here's what you saw, and here's what you're going to see tonight, and break it down like that. That's what the show is. It differentiates itself in that way. So the All City NBA podcast, you got to check it out, man. Of course, and I'm on this time of year. You're gonna see me pretty much on every ESPN platform breaking these games down, and then obviously playoffs. I'll be on SVP tonight after the second game on ESPN.
I love when you and SVP. It's the best. It's great stuff. How's the baby?
He's awesome, man. He's got his left hand is a little bit too involved on his jumper right now. We're working on that, but other than that, things are beautiful. Things are beautiful.
You got him, brother. You're the greatest, man. Thanks,
right,
buddy.
brother.
Always love leg day. We'll talk to you next week.
You got it. Talk to you soon.